The midnight shift. Empty hallways stretched before her. Grace, a seasoned night nurse, knew their shadows well. 20 years on the job, most of them on the midnight shift. She'd seen it all. Or so she thought. The hospital, a place of healing, could feel like a haunted house after midnight. Tonight the air felt different, heavier. Grace pushed her cart, wheels squeaking softly. Each squeak echoed in the silence. Her footsteps followed, a steady rhythm in the stillness. She always felt a strange sense of peace on these lonely nights. Tonight the peace was gone, replaced by a prickling unease. Ward 13, the most feared ward. Patients whispered about it, nurses avoided it, Grace never understood why. It was old, yes, but no different than any other wing of the aging hospital. Tonight, Ward 13 felt different, colder. A low hum emanated from the depths of the ward. The hair on Grace's arms stood on end. She shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter. The air grew colder as she passed the nurse's station. Her heart pounded a steady rhythm against her ribs. The flickering light. A light flickered at the end of the hall. Room 136, empty for years. Grace stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The call light, a beacon in the darkness, blinked on and off. A malfunction, she told herself. It had to be. She walked towards the room, each step hesitant. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe. A cold sweat broke out on her skin. She reached the door, her hand hovering over the handle. Room 136. The door creaked open. The room, shrouded in shadows, was ice cold. A figure lay on the bed, covered by a thin sheet. Grace's heart pounded in her ears. The room was definitely empty during her rounds earlier. "Hello?" Her voice came out a whisper. The figure on the bed didn't move. Grace stepped inside, her hand reaching for the light switch. The flickering overhead light snapped on, revealing a man's face. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. He was old, his face etched with wrinkles. He looked strangely familiar. Back at the nurse's station, Grace searched for the man's file. His name was Elias Thorne, admitted just an hour ago, but that couldn't be right. She hadn't admitted anyone. She pulled his file, the old paper brittle under her touch. The photo on the file matched the man in 136. But the date on the file was from 1954. Her blood ran cold. This man, Elias Thorne, should be long dead. A chill ran down her spine. She looked back towards room 136, a sense of dread washing over her. The flickering light seemed to mock her. This was impossible. Yet here it was, happening right before her eyes. Throughout the night, Grace couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Whispers seemed to follow her, whispers she couldn't quite make out. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision. Each time she checked on Mr. Thorne, he remained unchanged. The old clock on the wall ticked away. Each tick sounded like a hammer blow. The temperature in the ward dropped. Her breath formed clouds in the air. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. Then the lights went out. The entire ward plunged into darkness. The backup generator sputtered and died. Screams echoed from other rooms, but Grace only had eyes for room 136. A cold dread gripped her heart. Fumbling for her flashlight, she ran towards the room. The air grew colder, thick with an unseen presence. Her flashlight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Panic welled up inside her. Something was terribly wrong. The door to room 136 stood open. Grace stepped inside, her hand shaking as she pointed the flashlight. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. The only sound was her own ragged breathing. Then she saw it. Scrawled on the wall, written in what looked like blood, was a message. Heed the whispers. The flashlight slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. Grace stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror. Her back hit the wall and she slid to the floor, her face buried in her hands. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. The next morning, the lights flickered back on. The hospital bustled with activity. But Grace was already gone. She walked away from the hospital, her footsteps echoing on the pavement. She left behind her badge, her keys, and her career. She couldn't explain what she had seen, couldn't explain the feeling of dread that clung to her like a shroud. She knew one thing: she would never step foot in a hospital again. The whispers followed her, echoing in the silence of her mind. They always would.